All right, we are back, but I'm going to plug in my screen at the last second. Hopefully that will not disrupt the broadcast. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, we got the Tesseract right now, the Tesseract, that weird mirror field. Okay, we're back. It's COMP125. It's the summer 2018 semester at Centennial. We're week 12, part 1 of our broadcast. I really want to talk about assignment 4 details with you, just to go over some stuff around what's due over the next couple weeks. So just from a scheduling perspective, again, this week we're going to talk about Node at a very high level. What is Node? You don't know. Most of you don't know what that is. And next week is going to be Express. Then the week after that, there's going to be final exam, a final test more than anything else. So let's start with the assignment. And you don't know what this is, but bear with me while I talk about it. So guess what? You've been doing your portfolio all this time, right? I've been trying to build it up for you guys. And now you're going to basically port it to an Express server, okay? Now this server, we can't use GitHub pages for this server anymore. Anything from now on, we're going to have to move away from GitHub pages because it needs to run. You're going to actually make the server, and you have to run it somewhere on a compatible host that allows you to run the server software. So there's two parts of the server before I get into the details of the assignment. One part is the actual server software. And if you think about classic servers that we see all the time, Apache has a server that runs, that basically serves websites, right? And that's one part of the AMP stack, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, right? So Apache is the server software, and it basically serves pages or any kind of content, not just pages, images and movies and sound and everything else. It serves it to any requesting site. And that's what Apache does. So that's one stack. One solution stack is AMP. And then there's .NET, right, which has Internet Information Services. That's the server, right? And then it has SQL, which is the database, right? And usually C# as a language, right? So it's usually the three things are, what's the server, what's the database, what's the language, right? So Apache, MySQL, and PHP. PHP is the language, right? The backend language we're talking about, right? The .NET stack is IIS, SQL, and C#, right? And now we talk about this other stack, which is, it uses, a lot of times when we talk about Node, we use a database called Mongo, a Mongo database or a NoSQL database. So it's usually Mongo. And then a lot of times we combine Node, which is the server software, with a piece of middleware called Express, which helps us serve, creates a server and almost like a view manager. That's what it does. So we've been trying to create our view manager. Think about this, what we just did with Ajax. We kind of manage our views through Ajax, right, on the front end. But you can actually do a much better job of managing views on the back end, right? So instead of using Ajax, you let the server do all the routing for you, right? Ajax and routing on the front end is interesting, and some modern frameworks do that. Example, Angular. But really, we're talking about the most modern stack that you could learn is something called the mean stack, right? Or a MERN. Those mean and MERN. And we'll talk about that. So it's Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node. Those are the four pieces to this new solution stack. And you could say that it used to be an emerging technology stack. Now it's become more mainstream, but it's still pretty much on the edge. It's fairly new compared to every other stack that I mentioned, right? The other two. Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node. Those are the four pieces. But there's also the MERN stack, because sometimes people don't like Angular, they like using React. So it's Mongo, Express, React, and Node. That's the other very popular stack, mean or MERN. And Mongo doesn't have to be Mongo. It could also be some other serverless technology, all right? Because it's not like how we have SQL Server. SQL Server is a relational database, and so is MySQL or MySQL. Whereas Mongo is a NoSQL server. It doesn't use SQL or relational. It's not a relational database. It uses a JSON-like structure So you can almost see that you're using JavaScript everywhere. JavaScript on the back end, JavaScript on the front end, JavaScript on the database, right? Whereas on a traditional stack like AMP, right, using Apache, which has its own language, right? MySQL, which has its own language, SQL, right? And then PHP, which is its own language, 3 languages. And then plus you need to know HTML and CSS and JavaScript, right? That's all the things you need to know to make a web. That's why web development, like I told you in the beginning of the course, is probably the most difficult platform, because all these things you need to know compared to, hey, I'm a C# developer. All I need to know is C#. That's it. I'm good, right? I'm exaggerating, of course, but what I'm saying is it's just, this is the trend these days, right? So, and then in IIS, you have to know a little bit about the IIS server. It's not as bad as the Apache server, right? A lot of it's automated now with Microsoft Server. And then you need to know about SQL. So again, you have to learn, structured query language, just like you do for MySQL or the other variant, right? And then C#. So you need to know those 3 things again. It's like 3 different things to manage, right? Plus HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? Those are normal. But with MeanStack, right, it's just you're reusing JavaScript in different ways, right? So again, Mongo, use a JavaScript-like structure, right? Express, JavaScript. Angular, JavaScript, right? And Node, JavaScript. It's JavaScript everywhere, right? And you're still using JavaScript on the client plus HTML and CSS. So now you only have 3 things to know, period, right? Mostly JavaScript on the front end and back end. And if you know JavaScript, then it becomes, you understand how things are structured a lot easier. So for developers, it's like one language to rule them all, which would be JavaScript. That's why JavaScript, to me, is one of the most important languages in this modern web development era. Anyways, that's just kind of an intro. But let's talk about this new assignment. So again, due week 14, Wednesday, August 15th at midnight. You're going to use your current portfolio site content from previous assignments. Okay, so I don't expect you to make new content. It's the exact same content. You're going to port over to an Express server. You're going to make an Express server, and what you're going to have, you need to put this live. But now you can't use GitHub pages. You need to use either Microsoft Azure, DigitalOcean, which is you have to pay for, right? It's $5 a month, right? I'm just giving you options, all right? Hold on. Or Heroku, which is perfectly free, right? Which I recommend. And we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you to use Heroku, which is a service that you have to pay anything, at least in the beginning for basic things. And it'll allow you to directly deploy from GitHub directly to Heroku. There's nothing transferring. You don't have to upload anything. You literally link your GitHub account to Heroku, and bam, you've got a server, right? So that's what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks, this week and next week, right? So it's a lot of stuff to learn, but we need to get going, as always. And you're still going to have your 3 pages, a bio page, a projects page, and a contact page. Nothing different there. But what you need is you're going to use these things as content pages, your bio.ejs, your projects.ejs, your contact.ejs, right? And what that is let me add that to the dictionary too. EJS it's a templating engine, right? There's different templating engines that we're going to be talking about, right? And we're going to see the difference. What is a templating engine? We'll talk about that. But you're going to use the EJS templating engine, which is a little older, actually. The new one is Pug, right? It used to be called Jade. And you may not know any of this stuff what I'm talking about, but who cares? Just think about that you're using this engine, and the engine is going to do what we did with Ajax, which is inject HTML in the top part of your page, the bottom part of your page, just like we do in PHP, actually, when we have includes. If you ever took PHP, we have an include directive that includes different things in different places. It's going to be almost exactly the same with EJS. The syntax is very HTML-like, right? So when you look at it, you'll understand it. And you can include JavaScript in the page as well by passing objects into the page from the server side, which is very interesting. It's a different way of doing things. And once you learn how to do that, you're well on your way to kind of starting your stuff with Node. There's more, of course. We're not going to get into, we have no chance to get into databases. That's not covered here. And you'd be doing that in the next course, which I recommend. This is a nice flow from this course into the other course. which is COMP125, which I recommend, which is Emerging Technologies, if you have a chance to take it, which will be probably in the 5th or 6th semester, so many semesters from now, right? COMP308, yeah, that's the one that we have. And we usually do the mean stack as well as other technologies. Like we talk about Angular, we can't talk about Angular here. We have no time for that. Like a front-end framework. We're not going to talk about that at all this semester for my course. We won't talk about, I've mentioned it many times, but we never talked about it, or React. Not going to talk about that. It takes a whole semester to learn that stuff, really, and to give it a good go. Even this stuff, it takes a whole semester. So you're getting a bit of scratch the surface. How do I make a node server? How do I make an Express server? How do I organize files? How do I do those things? All right, that's what you're getting. Sorry? Usually it's offered in winter, COMP125, only in winter. Yeah, and it's, and again, different professors teach it, but it covers Node, Express, Angular, and Mongo, the whole mean stack. It covers all that stuff in more detail than I'm going to be covering it. Although I'm going to try and do it some justice. I'm going to try and almost extract the pieces that you need for Node and Express this week and next week, which usually takes 2 weeks, and then try and give you the things you need so you can complete your assignment. That's all I want to do. All right. We'll talk after. All right. So let's continue. I don't know what's happening in winter. I have no idea. All right. So, but one we can know is, I mean, we're sitting in the summer of 2019, right? 2018. I mean, I'll be okay. See, my mind is thinking summer of 2019 already because of what you just said. So summer of 2018, and I'll be okay. And this is your assignment for the next couple of weeks. So basically what you're doing is you're going to take this. There's no, like it says here, there is no front-end JavaScript or Ajax required. So it means like in your assignment number 1, I asked you guys to read, stuff from your JavaScript and inject your paragraphs. Forget it. Just put your paragraph text like you normally would in a web page. That was for, understanding how to use variables and JavaScript and all that stuff. I asked you to use Ajax in the last one. Forget it. Just put the pages, because now we're talking about a different level of technology, and combining Ajax with backend stuff is just, it's just going to be too difficult for you. So please embed your content like you normally would in your HTML. Okay, that's number 1. That's why I said 1A, forget the JavaScript stuff that we did when it came to reading stuff from files and all those things. We're still going to use JavaScript, but it's going to be on the back end. All right, that's A. B, your site should have at least 2 view templates. We'll actually have asked you for 3, bio, project, and contact.js. And we'll talk about what those are. At least 2. You can sometimes reuse one because they're very similar. You might call it something like content.js or something like that, which I recommend you might think about not doing. It's just easier to have 3. We'll talk about that. And you don't know what that means, so we'll go over it. And you need to at least handle some routing, all right? So it says an express route must exist for each page of your site. So I'll talk about routing, right? Because you need to know how to route from one page to the other. You need to understand how to do that, right? So some basic routing is going to exist. And you're going to do this app.get, which is like, actually it's going to be a router.get is what you're going to do. And a res.render. Res is response. A response object, you're going to render from the response some kind of view and whatever the location is that you're getting the view from. So let's say you're getting the view from my bio.ejs, and that's going to be the thing that feeds the view that you're going to render. Okay. So that's really the way it's going to be done, and we'll talk about that again in more detail. But this is the stuff that I want you to do for your actual site. Your site must have a specific structure, and we're going to use something called an express generator, which is going to generate or scaffold out our stuff really, really quickly because we have no time over the next 2 weeks. I typically won't allow you to do that stuff. I normally ask you to do everything from scratch by hand. No time for that. Right? So we're going to get you just to use the express generator and fill in what you need to fill in to make it work. You're going to generate the structure and use the EJS templating engine. And the way to do that is use the -e option, which I'm going to go over probably next week. All right. So structure-wise, we know how it works, but normally we have JavaScript, CSS, and multimedia asset files in those other folders. I always ask you to put it in content, scripts, and so on. And that's going to change because your Express generator is going to generate a structure for you. You can still put them in that structure, but you're going to have to put them in something called a public folder. So your scripts and your content folders are going to be inside of another folder called public. And we'll explain why that is as opposed to somewhere else. Because your application that you're going to be writing, this portfolio site application, really is two parts, right? You have your server-side stuff, and you have your client-side stuff. And you're going to kind of smash them together to make one kind of application. And in COMP125, they'll also talk to you, the emerging technology course, they'll talk to you about creating things like Docker containers, and actually, which I'm not going to cover, but which will allow you to run your node server in a container that you can replicate, and you can easily give it to somebody or pass it or replicate it across different sites for more availability. For now, that is not our concern. We're just making very basic a node server. We'll talk about what that is today, and a very, very basic Express middleware that we'll use next week. Okay. So that's the structure. And then it says you could get your JavaScript libraries through NPM or through the use of links to various CDNs, content delivery networks. So if you don't want to use NPM, you can use the CDNs that you can link to. I'm okay with that this time around, right? You don't have to use node modules to download everything. You can do that if you want, if it's easier for you, or you can use CDNs, which might be faster from a performance perspective. Internal documentation, again, like normal, that's nothing different. There's 4 marks for that. So again, just to go over the marks, so far we have like 9 and 4 is 13 marks for your actual pages and the routing and all that stuff. 15 marks for site structure. So structuring your things properly, keeping the same site structure is pretty good. So that means you don't have to do a lot there. A lot of this is free, like free marks, 15 marks. Because you're just going to be forced to put it in that structure anyway, whether you like it or not. And then 4 marks for internal documentation. And this is the part people get freaked out about, because you need 4 marks for version control and 4 marks for cloud computing. And I'm telling you, cloud hosting, guys, is a must in this last assignment. It cannot be GitHub pages. You have to actually sign up for a cloud host. And I'll talk about that today to get you guys going. Heroku is what I recommend. You also have access to Microsoft Azure because you're students. However, it's much more complex to get access. Sometimes it takes a week just to get access to Microsoft Azure. I will talk about both options. I will not talk about the Toronto-based DigitalOcean, which is actually a very good solution, very cheap if you're running a virtual machine. They run virtual machines for $5 a month, right? A droplet is what they call them, right? And they're very, very good. They're efficient and they're available. And it's free to sign up, and you just have to put a credit card in and you're good to go. And as for credit cards, you need a credit card for Heroku and you need a credit card for DigitalOcean. Heroku won't charge you, but you need to have one to sign up. I'm just telling you, right? The proper way to do it. And Microsoft Azure, definitely do not put a credit card on Microsoft Azure. They will charge you if you use things as pay as you go. But we'll talk about how to sign up as a student. All this is going to happen within 2 weeks. So again, this course, sometimes we take, for these 2 things I'm showing you, sometimes we take 3, 4, 5 weeks, right? We have no 5 weeks. We have 2 weeks. And then you have to learn these things and get them out. So you need to be attentive. You need to be here, or at least watching the videos, and then do what you have to do. Okay, so that's really it in a nutshell. That's what your assignment's going to be like. I've also spread out the marks, I believe, properly where they're supposed to be. It's 40 marks for 15%. Okay, that's what it works out to be. And it talks about all the stuff from where you're getting it. I'm looking at 3 things for your submission: a zip archive of your website's project files, a link to your GitHub, I recommend that, and a link to your live portfolio site hosted with some kind of cloud provider. You must have that working to get full marks on this last part, okay? You're almost there. You almost kind of did hosting, kind of. You know how to put things up online. Now it's a matter of, how do I use GitHub? If you've been using GitHub with me all semester, right? Literally, it's a button click to deploy to a live server. That's how easy it's going to be. And it's called continuous deployment, which we're going to cover, all right? Okay, so any questions around assignment number 4? You probably have tons of questions, but you don't know what to ask because you don't even know what the hell you're doing yet, right? So I'm going to put this up. We're going to talk about this again, but I'm going to stop the recording now and move into another recording that I'm going to do just for this other stuff. So you can always look back here and see the requirements. of assignment 4 if you ever have a question. Yes, the next video you ask questions. I'm sure you will. Okay, so let's stop recording now.